Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Prep Your Standard NATO. So today's going to be a little bit different than usual, and I will put in a fair warning right now that we're going to get emotional, because today's episode is in tribute to Lieutenant Colonel Michael Harris. With me today, I have his best friend, Sandra Seman-Bourke.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to share this incredible story about my best friend, Mikey.
So let's get straight into it then. How did you guys meet?
Mikey and I met almost 30 years ago in Bunbury, in the southwest of Western Australia. We were both starting out in our journeys as journalists. I was working for Radio News and Mikey was working for the Rural Department. Mikey grew up in Western Australia and after he finished high school he went to Muresk Agricultural College and studied a Bachelor of Rural Journalism. So that's how we met. We hit it off immediately. Right from day one we became best friends.
Yeah.
He was funny and kind and generous, and right from those early days it was clear he was going to be a brilliant journalist, and he was a brilliant journalist. He had an incredible turn of phrase and his vocabulary would just make the hardest journalist swoon. It was incredible. So he was this perfect, I like to describe Mikey as a unicorn because he was this, and I freaking love unicorns. He just had this incredible capacity to be such a strategic thinker while also being able to balance that with compassion and caring, and you know, he was emotional without being hysterical. Absolutely isn't the right word, but he could keep things in check, but absolutely had his heart in everything. And so I think for someone who ended up in defence and in the position that he did, that is quite unique.
Absolutely. But so we started out in agriculture.
Yes.
And then moved into defence.
Yes.
Interesting track.
Yeah, absolutely. So he spent time in Bunbury and then he went up to Kununurra, which is literally the end of the universe in Australia, with his then wife, Kimmy. When he first came to Bunbury, his partner, his fiancée, Kimmy, was still in Tasmania, and she eventually came over and they then went up to Kununurra, and I think that was enough. Kimmy was a very kind and passionate, supportive woman. Follow her man all the way to Kununurra. Mikey went on to do a few different things in that kind of communication space. I stayed with the ABC for 20 years, and it didn't matter where our careers took us. We stayed absolutely close, and I went on to marry David from Bunbury, and our two families were just extremely close, and Mikey and I were so fortunate that Kimmy and David were so understanding of this bond that Mikey and I had. Everyone knew me as Mikey's second wife and Mikey was my second husband, and that was just widely known, widely accepted. So friendships like that,
They're once in a lifetime.
yeah, absolutely. And as we'll find out as we go on today, Mikey passed away in January, and he's irreplaceable.
Yeah, he sounds like an amazing person. It sounds like the connection that you two had was, I'd say, soulmates.
Absolutely. There is no other way to describe it. And I'm just so fortunate that we met where we did, when we did, and that we were able to continue that friendship right until the very end.
And it survived his career in the Defence Force as well.
Yes, which, as we know, careers in the Defence Force have a habit of impinging on friendships and relationships. But I'll give you a little bit of Mikey's history. So he enlisted in the Australian Army in December in 1997 into the Australian Army Public Relations Service. He was promoted to Major in September 2002 and Lieutenant Colonel in January 2008. During his service, Mikey participated on operations Southern Ocean, Slipper, Interfet, Falconer, Catalyst, Relax and Warden.
That is a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. He deployed to Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, Iraq and the Middle East. And his final position And this is the type of person Mikey was. Like, I knew he had really reached very high levels within defence, but he was so grounded and just so interested in everybody else that it wasn't until I was speaking to the male equivalent of me, so there was me, the female best friend, and two male best friends who Pete and Phil, who've just been such an incredible support to me in this time. I was speaking to Pete last night and I said, okay, just give me the absolute correct title of Mikey's final position and I'll read it out to you. So it's a J09, Principal Advisor to the Chief of Joint Operations, Vice Admiral David Johnston at Joint Operations Command.
That's one heck of a mouthful.
Yeah.
Basically, he was top shit.
Yeah. Yes, he was. And he'd also held that position in 2009, 2010 during the time of Afghanistan and Iraq. So he made that incredible transition from being a journalist to working in strategic communications to being able to balance all of that. And he was also really passionate about greater transparency in defence to the public, and as we know, that's a very difficult area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of secrecy that
absolutely
needs to be retained.
And I understand the issues and the difficulties in that area, but Mikey was really passionate about a level of transparency to build confidence within the public, and it's not just about the bad stuff that happens, it's about all the fantastic, incredible stories. And I think with the advent of social media, we're really seeing the value and the relevance of sharing those amazing stories.
Yeah,
that the work that people do in their everyday life is part of their job, but is actually quite extraordinary.
Yeah, everyone hears about, somebody accidentally bombing the wrong place, but nobody hears about all the children that have been helped or the school that's been set up or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But then again, there are obstacles to convincing people that those are the stories that we need to tell and why we need to tell them. And in that space, Mikey was also so passionate about, actually the word that Pete used last night was fanatical about honouring those who made the ultimate sacrifice. So that was another area that Mikey was very, very strong in and really passionate about.
Something we definitely understand here at the RSL.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I need to tell you about his other achievements, and he was awarded the Commander Australian Theatre Commendation in 2001 and Joint CDF Commendation in 2005 and Australian Defence Force Commendation Silver in 2011.
Yes, so the impressiveness just keeps rising.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that when I was speaking to the people at Mikey's wake, it was just incredible how everyone who met him and everyone who knew him loved him. He was selfless and he was absolutely interested in everyone else rather than himself, and was an incredible leader, incredible mentor, incredible best friend, incredible husband, father, brother, son-in-law. He was a unicorn.
Yeah, I can see that. We'll add the glitter in later.
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned before that he had served overseas, and it was during one of these deployments that something catastrophic happened. I don't know what it is because he didn't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it broke him.
Yeah. You know that all too well.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
And for me, the issue that I have is why someone in Mikey's position, who he was based in Canberra in a very strategic position, he wasn't on the front line, he wasn't a fighter, why someone like Mikey would be put in that position where he was exposed to something like that.
Yeah. There's a rule in Defence Force that if you're not deployable, then you're not in the Defence Force, which I think needs to be changed because there's a lot of good people can do that doesn't need to be deployed. And I guess that's one of those, you're a soldier first. So his expertise might not have been considered at that point and it might have been one of those soldier first situations.
Possibly.
Just a guess.
Yeah, look, I think you are absolutely right. And again, I have spoken to people that I know within defence who assure me that there is support before deployment, there is support during deployment, there is support on the return.
Mm-hmm.
But I think unless you are emotionally resilient or able to check your emotions into a box before you deploy,
mm-hmm.
and we know that there are people in defence who can absolutely do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an absolute strength for them. Mikey was not that person.
He sounds like somebody who had a lot of heart, so to have to corner yourself off like that was just not going to be possible.
No,
for
absolutely.
Like
and the incredible emotional intelligence that he had. That is something that I still struggle with today.
Mm-hmm.
It has impacted on his family and on those closest to him, and it's very difficult not to feel resentment for that damage that was done.
Yep. As the daughter of 2 veterans with PTSD, I understand exactly how that feels.
Yeah. And then with PTSD, so someone then drew my attention to post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think if you are emotionally resilient, that perhaps that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to Mikey and subsequently how he dealt with it didn't stop him doing his job. As we can see, he absolutely excelled, and the support that he gave to everyone that he came in contact with was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But that personal cost to him, and especially his family, is very difficult to reconcile.
Yeah, sounds quite devastating.
Yes, absolutely. And it breaks my heart, it hurts my heart, and I know that he's not the only one, and that it continues to happen. And I am reassured that things are better, things have changed, there's a lot more recognition. But I still wonder about the stigma attached, as there is still a stigma in the wider community and in society in relation to PTSD and your emotional health, your mental well-being.
We've come a long way in the last 10, 20 years, but there's still a very long way to go.
Yeah. So that, for me, is something that still is very difficult to get past and to deal with. And then several years ago, Mikey was diagnosed with bowel cancer. And in later years, Defence admitted contributing to that cancer.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that they admitted that, because that hopefully, we'll find out in a minute, would have made his treatment a little bit easier and more cost effective if the Defence Force were helping to cover some.
Yes, they did.
Good.
Yes, they did. It's the afterwards that I still have issues with, but I'm sure that we will get to. So Mikey, as is his wont, carried on, never complained, not once, not ever. Lined up for all of his treatments, took all of his treatments, and thankfully he did go into remission and things were great. All the time he was still working, still doing an incredible job. But in 2015, he was on a golfing trip with some workmates and developed a really sore back, which he couldn't really understand why. He hadn't hurt himself, he hadn't exerted himself, and it impacted actually on the trip, so he couldn't sort of keep playing golf. So when he got back, we had a chat, and he was just explaining to me it was odd, he didn't understand it, he was going to go and get it checked out, and when he did, we found out that his cancer had come back and had spread. And that started a whole other journey of treatment. And again, I'd lost count of how many chemotherapy treatments he had, and he just kept doing it, kept trying it. It was not an option for any of us that he wasn't going to go into remission again. Just ever the optimist.
Did it once, we'll do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In that time, he did some crazy things.
All right, let's do that. Some crazy things.
He had an incredible sense of humour. He was expert level dad joke teller.
Oh, no.
Just beautiful, very funny, just, yeah, hilarious. So he decided that he would buy a stag.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a man who had many, many abilities. Mechanical abilities were not any of them. Yeah. The car broke down. I think he went to pick it up from Melbourne and broke down before he got it back to Canberra. Like, it was just so beyond a lemon. This car was an absolute disaster. So much of a disaster that it sat on his front verge for 3 years.
Oh, I bet everyone was pleased with that.
Especially Kimmy. Yeah. So he was very fortunate that a group of his mates all helped him out. It's still a long-running joke now that he bought this stag, and it was up to everyone else to help sort it for him. He was there and he was enthusiastic, and you see the photos, and he was, very seriously looking into the, and it was hilarious. When things took a turn for the worse, that's when his mate stepped in, and unbeknownst to him, they bandied together in the dark, would kind of come in and steal pieces off the car and go and get them remachined, and were sourcing parts for the car, and they were quietly rebuilding the car so that it would be drivable. So these are the kinds of mates that he had who not only volunteered their time but financially contributed towards getting this car on the road for Mikey.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, with all that in mind, continuous rounds of treatment, looking at this car sitting on the front verge, getting mates to help him out with it, Mikey decided to complete his Masters of Philosophy.
Good on him, well done.
Because what else would you do with all that time? Yes. So, the title of his thesis is The Limits to Transparent Government Official Information Communication During the Search for Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So, when MH370 went down in March 2014, Mikey came out. He came out here to Perth straight away. This is where the search was based. This is where all that work was being done. And he was here for months working 18-hour days. It was intense. It was incredible. In all that time, I got to see him twice just because that's the kind of person he was. He worked relentlessly. He didn't want that pressure on other people. So he took that pressure and encouraged people to work reasonable hours and did not take his own advice.
Those people.
Those people. So he was very good at looking after everybody else. Not so much himself.
As those people generally are.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it gives you the sense of and the calibre of the person that he was, that he took his role very seriously. He took his position as a leader really seriously, but was very generous in supporting and sharing that information and helping build people up. I was reading through the eulogy from his best mate who gave the defence eulogy. Mikey was known, he'd give people enough rope to make a mistake or to get themselves into trouble so that he can help them back and show them the error of their ways, which is a fantastic characteristic. Now we're going to get to the last 3 months of Mikey's life. So, Mikey did this thing when he had bad news to tell me. He wouldn't actually ring me and tell me, he'd put it in a text.
Oh, great.
So then we would, every time. So then we would go through the palaver of knowing that he'd send me the text, I would read the text and I would call him straight away. So it was probably August last year that I got one of these texts, and look, the news wasn't great. He didn't like upsetting me, so, I would have to dig for the truth. So I got this text, so of course I ring him up straight away. And the conversation went something like this. Me, Mikey, I'm going to give you a smack. Mikey, I'm pregnant. Me, Mikey, that is sensational. Mikey, I've got 12 months to live. Me, I think I preferred you being pregnant. Yeah. That's how these conversations went. Mm-hmm. So in August last year, we thought we had a year. Yeah. So we kind of planned, I would come for a visit and I would spend time and we'd go for walks with the dogs and just get to spend some, beautiful quality time together, not rushed, being able to enjoy each other's company and time with his beautiful family. And then he developed some very serious complications with his liver, and he spent about 2 months in hospital all the time, being confident, still working.
Still working.
I know. Trying to finish his thesis. He said to me, would I edit it for it? Just keeping on going, yeah. Which is the kind of beautiful man he was. And then in October, Mikey phones me from hospital, which never happens.
Instantly suspicious.
Yeah. And it was kind of a bit too bright and a bit too breezy, a little bit hyper. And he said to me, Kimmy's trying to get a hold of you. I said, okay, that's really good. Great, I'll get in touch. And he said, the nurses are here, I must go. Odd. All of this is very odd. Kimmy had been away and she got back to Canberra, I think on the Saturday. On the Sunday night, she phoned me to tell me that Mikey had been given a week to live. Oh. Yeah. So that was about 9 o'clock Sunday night, and I was on the first flight to Canberra on Monday morning. His daughters, Ashayla and Brianna, picked me up from the airport, took me straight to the hospital, and things were grim. He was still trying to maintain that gorgeous sense of humour, downplaying everything. The girls didn't tell him till the last minute that I was going to be there, so it was a really gorgeous, beautiful reunion. Mikey had the best hugs. He was not afraid of a good hug, that man. That's why we got on so well. So in those 3 days at hospital, I got to spend some beautiful time with him, took him outside. We'd had the most incredible chats, and he, again, not ever complained, no regrets. The only thing that he was really worried about were the people he was leaving behind. Mm-hmm. So again, he was worrying about everybody else except himself in a gorgeous, beautiful Mikey fashion. Mikey and the girls had bought Kim a beautiful ring that he wanted her to wear for Christmas time, and it was beautiful. It was stunning. We did a lot of reminiscing. We did a lot of laughing. We didn't do a lot of crying together. There was no time for crying. He didn't want crying because he knew there'd be plenty of time for that afterwards. So it was on the Wednesday that I was flying home, and Mikey's team of specialists were trying to have him moved to a hospice. Mm-hmm. We got the call that morning that he would be moving to the hospice that day. And Mikey wanted to look pretty for his journey, so he sent Kim and the girls out to buy him a new outfit for his trip to the hospice. So I took him outside into the courtyard, and we were about to have a coffee and a cup of tea, and we got the call that the ambulance had arrived early. He had to be transported by ambulance. Mm-hmm. I was so fortunate to have that journey with Mikey from the hospital to the hospice. And again, the ambulance driver asked us if we were husband and wife, which we thought was hilarious, and trying to explain that we weren't, but we kind of were. And, it's okay, everyone knows. That was very sweet. But the trip wasn't very far, and we were holding hands, and Mikey just became really reflective, and we both understood the enormity of that journey that was going to be Mikey's final trip. So we got him into the hospice, and it was gorgeous. It was on the edge of a lake, and it was beautiful, and it was comfortable. The staff were really lovely. And they normally only let people stay at the hospice for up to 4 weeks because generally people are at the end of their journey. Mm-hmm. Well, our gorgeous boy hung on for 11 weeks.
Well done.
Well played, Mikey. But I'm so pleased that he was there because the hospital was just, it was depressing. It was awful.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
Yeah, they absolutely are. So this was a much nicer place for him to be. The girls could bring their dog down to Mikey, and it was just beautiful. He was a lot more comfortable there, and it was just guest after guest. You know, seriously, he needed an agent to do the booking. It was incredible, the amount of people who just came and wanted to spend that time. And because he did live longer than we expected, and we're so grateful for that time, people were able to, you know, have several visits with him, and college, university friends were able to fly over from Western Australia, and Mikey's brother Shane and Mark, who is also in defence, and their sister Karen got to come over and spend some really beautiful time with him as well. He did have some outings, and it was during that time that his mates unveiled the rebuilt stag, and he was just so chuffed. He was overwhelmed, and uncomfortable isn't the right word, but him trying to understand that people had donated financially to make this dream come true for him made him feel a little uncomfortable. And, you know, I just explained to him, there is a reason why this happened, and it's because of who you are, and you just need to shush and enjoy. Enjoy it, you know. And he did. It was just incredible, and the beautiful media team from his department just made the most incredible, powerful video about. And it was beautiful. It was almost like a news story. The guys did such an amazing job, and where they interviewed Mikey and his two beautiful mates, Pete and Phil, and they were absolutely ribbing him about his, you know, enormous lack of any mechanical knowledge and how he was such a mechanical knucklehead, and these gorgeous boys had to step in. And it was such a beautiful thing that not only Mikey's friends to help rebuild this car, but that the girls now have this beautiful, you know, video of their dad. And they've got the vehicle, and the girls are going to keep it to drive. So I know Pete does go around to start it up and kick the wheels and curse at the car a bit more. And, but the girls really did want to hang on to it as a beautiful reminder for their dad. So while I was there spending those beautiful days with Mikey, we went through his funeral arrangements. He had organised, unsurprisingly, every final detail. And again, there was this beautiful calmness about him. It wasn't, you know, a matter-of-fact kind of organisation. It was, just this beautiful calmness of understanding that this was happening. And he just wanted to make things easier for everyone else by arranging everything. Yeah. So he and I went through the plan, and he had decided the people who were going to be delivering eulogies, and my role was going to be that if Ashley and Brianna wanted to write something about their dad, that I would read that for them, so that we didn't need to put them through that. What Mikey also did, and he got me to help him, is that he wrote the most beautiful cards for Kim and the girls that they have been receiving on special anniversaries and birthdays.
Oh, that's sweet.
And they didn't know that was happening, which makes it even more special. Not only was Mikey the most incredible wordsmith, but his handwriting is so beautiful. It's just incredible. So we've got this beautiful combination of, you know, just his cards and his letters are so beautiful to look at, and the words are just heartbreakingly beautiful and from his heart. And so when Kim got the first card, it was for their wedding anniversary. She couldn't open it for the longest time because just seeing his handwriting on the card was very difficult. But again, that shows you the kind of person that he was. He was just constantly thinking of everyone else.
He sounds amazing.
He absolutely was and still is. Okay. So, Mikey's goal was to make it to Christmas, and he absolutely did that. He wanted to have that beautiful memory with his girls. He was really, really unwell by that time, but absolutely gave it his best effort. And the photos are beautiful, and the girls are so grateful that they got to have that special time with him. What that 11 weeks gave me was the opportunity, with the time difference, to have lots of incredible, beautiful, long phone calls. It was all the visitors had gone. He was sort of settling down for the night. That was the time that I could give him a call, and we would just have beautiful, incredible phone calls that, I mean, it's always easier to be able to say things to people when you're not actually looking at them.
Yes.
And it was very difficult. You know, it was a really busy time when we were there, and of course, you know, people were wanting to spend that time with Mikey, and there were doctors and specialist teams, and so we were really fortunate to be able to have those times. And in typical Mikey fashion, he would send out this group text message every morning to his nearest and dearest 100 friends. There were 100 people on this text list. And he would give a rating of how his health was overnight. The complications around his medical condition in the end were around his liver and bile flow. So he would give us the millimetre reading every morning, you know, green, amber, red, alert level. And it wasn't just a, you know, 3 or 4 word. It was screens fulls of updates that we would get every day. And it was, and again, given the time difference, I don't keep my mobile phone in the bedroom, but I would keep an ear out for that ping, for that sound, knowing that my kid made it through the night and that we were getting another, you know, hilarious, detail-filled text message on the goings-on of his liver. But there came a point where he was just too unwell and we couldn't have those anymore. And then Kimmy was able to update. The group obviously got a lot smaller, and we were kept up to date with his condition. Mikey passed away peacefully on the 17th of January. And so the preparations to say goodbye began. So his family and friends from Perth were making our trips, planning our trips back to Canberra. And Mikey's funeral was on a Tuesday. And I get a text message from Kimmy on the Saturday asking me how I was going with my eulogy. Yeah.
You weren't writing one.
No, I wasn't. No, I was not. So all of Mikey's planning, there was a flaw in that planning. So somewhere, somehow, in that 11 weeks, the plan changed. Yeah. So as you can tell, I'm a pretty emotional kind of girl. So asking me to not only write the friend eulogy, but then to deliver it, seriously, you could not have picked a more emotional chick to do that. Mikey asked 3 of us to write and deliver eulogies, and Phil Pike, one of the male besties, gave the defence eulogy, I gave the friend eulogy, and Mikey's brother Shane gave the family eulogy. The funeral was in the beautiful Anzac Chapel at Duntroon, and for someone who has a very basic understanding of defence and military protocol, it was pretty overwhelming. Seeing the calibre of people who were there. That chapel was full. It was overflowing. It was beautiful. So, when we were getting ready to head to Kimmy's house, we were all going to the chapel from her place. I tried to practice reading my eulogy again and didn't even make it to the second line and was just sobbing. Unsurprisingly. Sobbing. So I'm trying to pull myself together. So I decided to have a chat to Mikey. And I'm not a religious person, kind of spiritual maybe, but I had a very stern conversation with Mikey and said, buddy, you put me in this position, you are going to be with me while I'm reading this. And I managed to somehow, miraculously, make it through the eulogy without crying. But I made other people cry. And I was surprised by who I made cry. In my eulogy, I talked about this incident with Mikey, this catastrophic incident that changed him. And I didn't know at the time, but that set off a chain reaction amongst Mikey's colleagues and soldiers. It was a point that really resonated with them.
Absolutely, it would have.
And it wasn't until we were walking to the wake in the grounds of Duntroon. Oh, and I didn't mention that Vice Admiral David Johnston was Mikey's official mourner.
Oh.
Yeah. Again, what does that say about our beautiful, incredible
Unicorn?
And it was so beautiful because we walked from the chapel to the function area where we had the wake, and David walked arm in arm with Kimmy all the way. It was just so beautiful. He had such an incredible connection with Mikey and his family. He's a great hugger, can I say? I'm sure I'm breaking every single protocol. I'm going to wear this one. He is an awesome hugger.
Maybe they train that secretly.
Yeah, maybe. I just think he was just such an incredibly warm, generous. When you look at the calibre of the man that David is, and he could not have spoken more highly, more warmly. He was devastated at the funeral. You know, he really was. So he and I got to talk outside as we were waiting to go into the wake, and then we got to spend some more time talking. The wake was gorgeous. It was out in the grounds. It was a really humid day. I don't know if it gets very humid in Canberra, but it was really warm that day. And I was just sitting under a tree, just sort of trying to, pull myself together. And then something really incredible happened. This line of tough, built soldiers crying were coming to me and sobbing and sharing their stories and telling me how that comment about coming back broken really resonated with them. Mikey didn't want anyone at that funeral wearing their uniforms, but he wanted them wearing their medals. And I have never seen that many grown men cry, and who were devastated that they too had lost Mikey. And they all, shared a beautiful story or an anecdote or, some daggy dad joke or something, but they all had something. It was just, and it was like, yeah, you're not telling me anything I don't know, thanks. But it was beautiful, it was amazing that, again, given the work that all these people do, given the high level of training that they do, that they were not only openly crying in front of someone that they don't know, but were sharing their experiences and were doing that freely. And they all promised that they would do more to look out for each other, which was just so powerful. And it wasn't until I was talking to some people afterwards who, so, initially I thought about not including that in my eulogy, but you know what? I'm so bloody angry about it. I don't care if I upset people, and obviously it needed to be said, and I'm really pleased that I said it, and people were grateful that I had. And these guys promised to do better, to look out for each other, to look out for themselves, to ask for help if they need it, to
That's
offer help.
Part.
And that is absolutely the hardest part. And just that they were so open was really powerful and incredible. And I just felt so honoured to, number one, have been given that opportunity, although to get the very, very late call up, Mikey, for the eulogy, but to have been able to, open that conversation was really powerful, and I'm still so grateful. And Pete, one of Mikey's besties, really summed it up beautifully. For him, I tipped him off with the calling Mikey the unicorn, and that I freaking loved unicorns. So now, he is everyone's unicorn. But he absolutely, and he has been, both he and Phil have been such an incredible support to me, because we're all struggling.
Have somebody so amazing and so close to you taken away.
And he was 49,
so young.
It was just ridiculous. So they are absolutely living up to what they said, and we do check in with each other. And, I've got 2 new best friends in Phil and Pete, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. So Mikey would have turned 50 in March, so we coordinated celebrations around Australia. So I organised the family catch-up in Fremantle at a gorgeous harbourside bar. There were a couple of tears, but, it was just a beautiful opportunity to come together. Mikey's family have been so welcoming of me and so beautifully kind, and I have forged such a beautiful relationship with Mikey's stepmom, Davina, and I spoke to her today and told her about this interview, and of course we cried. But, we are all feeling it, and I'm sure that Mikey's colleagues, everyone who knew him, is feeling it, and we will continue to feel it. So we got to 2 days before Anzac Day, and Phil and Pete were talking about that they would be laying wreaths for Mikey in Sydney and in Hobart. I live in Fremantle, and we have always gone to the Anzac Day dawn service in Fremantle, which is just so beautiful.
It's a beautiful spot.
And I have another very good friend who is in defence, and he very much supported and encouraged me to lay a wreath for Mikey in Fremantle, so that's what I did. And it was devastating, and it was heartbreaking, and it was beautiful, and it was powerful. It was special, and I'm going to do that every year for our gorgeous boy. And then we all set a time where we would all raise a toast. So there were photos from all around Australia of us all toasting Mikey on Anzac Day. It was just so beautiful.
What an amazing impact he's had on everyone.
And that's what makes the loss so much harder, There are elements in most people's character that you think, I don't really like that about that person. There is nothing about Mikey that you couldn't like.
Even his bad traits you hated.
Even his...
Love, sorry. Even his bad traits you loved, is what I was saying.
Oh, we love his bad jokes and his, typical evasive boy, avoiding sharing bad news. For all those things, we absolutely all just loved him. And, people like that, we're just so lucky to have in our lives. And for Defence to have had Mikey, how lucky are they? And one of Mikey, actually, look, he did have one regret, is that his health deteriorated so quickly that he didn't get to wrap up his work with handover notes and all that sort of thing.
Again, trying to make someone else's life easier.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah, that's right. And it's, darling, we've got a bit of a health situation going on here, so can we just focus on you?
I think people are going to understand.
Would you mind? Can we just look after you? Yeah. So, look, we're so fortunate to have such a kind, loving, smart, strategic, passionate, loyal, you can fit in husband, brother, son, best friend, work colleague. You can just, he was all those things to everyone that he knew him. And we were so lucky to have him. But I would really like to leave you with some words from his video. You hold your head high and make sure you have done all you could do to be a better person, to be a mate to your mates, to respect the friendships that are out there, to continue to live life as much as you can. I know it's glib to say to live each day to the fullest, but until it's taken off you, you will never know how important it is. Just love life. And we loved Mikey.
This podcast was edited, published and produced by the RSLWA. Head to www.rslwa.org.au for other content. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook.